put your hand up if you have not yet made a decision for this particular race. Oh, cool. All right, those of you who have not made decisions, come on up towards the front, please. Come on. You got to get a good look at the people that may be representing you. Because here's the thing. Politics is a game about how resources are distributed. And the question that is going to be answered when you put somebody in office is, how should they be distributing resources to what particular projects? And you're here because you care. So what I'd like you to do is turn to the person next to you and give them a high five and go, you are awesome. You're awesome because you care enough to be here.
Okay.
You guys are awesome. Because you're paying attention to the issues. Because you're paying attention to who is going to represent you. You're here because you care about bigger issues. So I want to recognize you for being here. So we're going to do things a little bit differently. Jerry and I had a conversation about it. Right, Jerry?
This looks like a hostage video.
So, you know, there's like you heard the whole sausage making thing, right? Well, we've got a bunch of questions, but we wanted to randomize them because there's only so much time to answer so many questions about so many topics. So this is the brown paper bag. And the brown paper bag has questions in it. And Jerry's going to put his hand in the brown paper bag, and he's going to read off a question. And then we're going to get, what, 90 seconds?
90 seconds.
You guys will get 90 seconds to answer the question. But we're going to make it a little bit interesting and a little bit different. And that's what these are. Each of you gets one red card. What is the red card for, you might ask yourselves? The red card is a wild card. Because we come to so many of these things, and they're kind of boring, right? Am I the only one who, no? Yeah? Am I the only one who finds these boring? Really? Okay. You don't? Jeez. Okay. I'm the only one who finds these boring. So sometimes they aren't really debates. You know, people put across what their positions are, and we get a sense of what those positions are, but then there isn't any debate and there isn't back and forth. So you guys have a wild card, and your wild card is designed to stop things only if one of your colleagues says something that's off base. Ooh. If they say something off base, you get to stop everything. And Jerry's going to pay attention, because he knows these issues like the back of his hand. The man is a political master. You get to stop it, and then very quickly you explain why it's wrong and what it is instead. And you've got 60 seconds to do that. Fun?
One time, you get to use your red card.
One time and only one time. And then some of you have little sheets of paper. We will explain some surprises to you that come after the break. So for now, let's enjoy our time here.
Can we hear in the back?
No. Is your mic on?
Oh, now.
Introducing the famous, the wonderful, the amazing Jerry Roberts. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Natasha, for that introduction, which is, of all the introductions I've ever had, the most recent. I really can't wait to hear what I have to say. First, we're going to begin with a short quiz about the rules that Natasha just outlined. It'll be closed book, and I'll give you a handout. Okay, thank you all for coming. I know that Michael Bloomberg and Bernie Sanders are duking it out, but I think in terms of the community, this is a more immediate and urgent race, so good for you. And also credit to Betsy and Natasha and Fred and Sue for organizing this on short notice. I know it's hard to believe. Our format is loose, as you can tell. We're going to have opening statements from the candidates of about 2 minutes. At the end, we'll have closing statements as well, and then in between, I'll ask questions, which were mostly solicited in advance. Some I just kind of put together and consolidated as well. And the candidates, I'll have 2 minutes for the open and 90 seconds for the answers to questions, and we're hoping to keep it nice and loose and conversational, and I know everyone will be courteous and civil and not filibuster and go over their time. Okay, so let us start right here with Elsa Granados. Elsa, you got 2 minutes.
Thank you. I've been a public servant for over 3.5 decades.
Microphone?
Do you have a microphone?
There we go.
Good idea. I have been a public servant for over 3.5 decades. I want to be your next assembly member because I know that I can make a difference in the most pressing social, economic, and environmental issues that we face. I have a track record of creating change. In my role of executive director at Standing Together to End Sexual Assault, our local rape crisis center, which, by the way, this is my 23rd anniversary today, I have developed a strong public policy background at a local, state, and national level, which will serve me well in the legislature. I've developed public policy in Sacramento, working with assembly members and senators to sponsor legislation that affects survivors of sexual assault. At a national level, I've worked with colleagues to affect language of the Violence Against Women Act, a piece of federal legislation that sets standards for and provides funding for all domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking services in the country. And it gives those funds to some of the most vulnerable in our communities, like farm worker, indigenous, and incarcerated women. Prior to coming to Santa Barbara, I worked with the San Francisco Mayor's Office of Children and Youth and Families in order to do research and set public policy to provide over $13 million to some of the most vulnerable in the San Francisco Bay Area. During my 23 years at STESA, I have maintained a positive financial position for the organization. This means that I'm using the center's funds in a way that is intended by the taxpayers and the legislature. I have a strong understanding of state and federal regulations in a wide variety of issues, the use of public funds, compliance issues, and human rights. Thank you.
Thank you. Charles Cole.
Hello, I'm Charles Cole. I'm a 20-year-old ex-student and media business owner. I live in Santa Barbara, and I was born here. I went to Santa Barbara High School and Santa Barbara Junior High. Go Dons. Yeah. I wrestled in high school, and I was also part of the Matt Academy there and the Donsnet Cafe, which is a business and accounting program for that school. It's now unoperational, from what I've heard, which is pretty sad, really. And then I went on to the City College, where I took some language courses and more accounting and business courses. Right now I'm taking a break from school to run for this office, so I can focus all my attention on this race. My mom owns a bookkeeping service, and my father is a builder and a construction company owner. And then he went back to school to get a law degree, so that's my family history. A couple of years ago, we started the public relations business, and we cut the video of Celeste Barber doing the Pledge of Allegiance at the City College when the whole protest was happening. They shouted her down and called the pledge white supremacist, nativist, and no longer relevant. So we cut that video, it got 9 million hits. And the trustees let that happen. I thought that was ridiculous. And that was around the time when I actually first started getting interested in politics, was from the city college, and from that, and from when I went to hear Bernie Sanders speak at the city college when I was 16. Heard him saying, "We'll give you free college. It'll be free." No, it's not going to be free.
Thanks, John.
Sorry, I went back.
Stephen Blum.
Hey, I'm Stephen Blum, and it's a pleasure to be here. This is a beautiful venue. I'm still waiting for the cocktail waitress. If any of you want to see her, send her over here. I really appreciate the invitation. I had fun reading about your organizations that are sponsored tonight, so thank you. Thanks for caring about the community and preserving it and enhancing it. I came to Ventura County. I'm a native Californian, but I came to this area 46 years ago, and I've never left. And why would I? It's, to me, the prettiest spot in the country. I've been to all the states, and I would not want to live anywhere but here. I am a Ventura resident, but Ventura's cool too. I'm confident that I have the resume and the experience and the knowledge and the skill set to do this job. I was 12 years on the Ventura County Community College Board. I was 5 years on the California Community College League State Board. I was the president of the Teachers Union for 12 years in Ventura. I taught for 30 years and counting. I taught at Buena High School, Foothill High School, and I currently teach school law at California Lutheran University. I'm also a practicing attorney representing mentally ill clients at parole hearings. I have a bachelor's and a master's and a doctorate degree. And my fellow candidates, whom I've grown to really like and admire, talk about their track records, and they all have impressive track records. I had 8 of them when I left Cal Lutheran. I was a runner. So I just wanted to throw that out. I'm in their Athletic Hall of Fame, and I'm in the Ventura County Hall of Fame too. So if you want to talk about track records. Anyway, the biggest thing I think I have to offer is from coaching. I learned how to put together a group of people to work for a common purpose. I have a knack for getting people to work together, and I think my time is up.
Thank you. Jason Dominguez.
Thank you for being here tonight. Your being here is an expression of hope. There are people out there whose faces are in despair, who aren't here tonight, who aren't comfortable coming to public meetings. And you're here to make sure that we're held accountable and that we're bringing our best ideas, our best actions, and that we're going to work as hard as we can to fix some of the really difficult problems that we're facing as a community. Too many politicians have been more interested in scoring political points and actually getting things done. I'm the son of an Army soldier and an elementary school teacher. His family came from Jalisco, Mexico, and my mom's family came from Oklahoma, political and economic refugees. I've grown up my entire career helping the underprivileged and the victimized. I joined my first board of directors when I was 16, and I've been on boards ever since. I worked as a deputy district attorney prosecuting perpetrators of domestic violence and standing up for the victims of domestic violence. I went from there to becoming a city attorney and running a neighborhood prosecution program where I spent most of my time working with the community to solve some of the problems that create crime and to stop crime before it happens rather than punishing people after the fact when we have a system that's not very good at rehab. From there I came and worked for county council as a civil attorney, worked on land use issues, learned other areas of the law, and then I went to the United Nations and prosecuted war criminals. From there, I've run nonprofits, including the Santa Barbara Legal Aid Foundation, again, where I've served the underprivileged. I've defended people whose mortgages were at risk, people whose leases were at risk, and tried to keep them housed. And I run a new civic forum, which does youth leadership, and it does advanced healthcare directives, because healthcare is a human right, and we haven't done enough. Our leaders have really ignored the problem of homelessness, and it's time that we have a change in that policy. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jason. Supervisor Steve Bennett.
Thank you. My name is Steve Bennett. I'm on the Board of Supervisors down in Ventura County. And we have just 2 minutes here, and I want to try to let you know who I am, why did I get involved in politics, and what do I want to do in the state legislature. So I'm going to talk really fast like Hubert Humphrey. I'm really not going to talk that fast, but I grew up in the Midwest. I went to school on the East Coast at Brown University, and I graduated with honors in economics. And I was going to go to graduate school in economics, and I stopped to say, you know, I should get some real-world experience, and I taught. I ran a small business, the first windsurfing business east of the Mississippi River, back right when I got out of college. And I fell in love with teaching. And so I never went to graduate school, and I moved out here when my wife, I met my wife. Her grandfather was the principal of Ventura High School during the Depression and during World War II. So I taught at Nordoff High School, then in Ojai, and then I started looking at county government, and I saw things that concerned me. The biggest one being that Ventura County had 0 reserves in 2000, at the end of a real prosperous time. They were spending more money than they were taking in every year, and I committed myself to trying to turn that around. And I went in and we quit doing one-time expenses being used for ongoing expenses. Reserves went from 0 when I was elected in 2000 to now we have 13% of our budget in reserves. I want to work on the same issues that I think you'll hear most other candidates here work on in the state legislature, and that is climate change, affordable housing, quality health care, good education, and emergency preparedness. I think the difference is I have 20 years as a Board of Supervisors with a great track record of getting things done. And I'm committed to trying to do good government in Sacramento by working and focusing on those issues and getting good things done for all of us in Santa Barbara and Ventura County. Thank you for coming tonight. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve. Jonathan Abboud.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jonathan Abboud. I'm running to be your next state assembly member. I also want to tell you a little bit about who I am, what my values are, what I'm going to do in the state assembly, and some of why I might be the most qualified candidate up here. My parents came to this country back in the late 1980s. They immigrated from Lebanon, from a war-torn situation, moved to the city of Los Angeles to an immigrant working-class neighborhood. We belonged to underfunded schools, though. We were near an oil field, and that taught me about environmental injustice. But we also had rent control, which taught me about the importance of housing stability in someone's life. With the underfunded schools, though, my mom did something big. Because we belonged to LAUSD, she transferred me to the Culver City School District, another public high school, and that taught me a lot about politics and the inequities in our society, and made me think, why are there even good and bad schools in the first place? They should all be great schools. I moved to the Central Coast in 2010 to attend UC Santa Barbara, where I served as the student body president during a really tough time in our community. We had a mass shooting, we had a big riot, and that led me to stay in my community instead of going to grad school and work on creating self-governance in Isla Vista. And we worked with our assembly member at the time to create the Isla Vista Community Services District, where I now serve as general manager. I'd love to tell you more about what we do there later tonight. Also in 2014, I ran and won an election to be on the Santa Barbara Community College Board of Trustees, where I've served there for 5 years now as an elected official, the youngest community college trustee in the state. I'm running on the value that we prosper only when everyone prospers, and when California is the 5th largest economy in the world, I don't feel that everybody is prospering in this state. We have homelessness is growing, people keep living further away from their jobs, not being able to afford housing, and educational debt is growing as well on a daily basis. I'm running on making education a lifelong right, building affordable housing, and combating climate change with the Green New Deal. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. And our 7th candidate, Santa Barbara Mayor Cathy Murillo, could not be with us tonight. I guess it was too far to come. Betsy is going to read a statement from Cathy that she sent.
Thank you very much.
Mayor?
We wanted everybody to have a chance to be heard, so I offered to read Cathy's statement. And I also told her that she had 3 minutes, so it's a little bit long. That's my fault. So good evening, and thank you to the organizers for putting together this event. I'm sorry that prior obligations prevent me from participating. And to the good voters of Assembly District 37, please vote for me, Cathy Murillo, and send a strong, progressive leader to Sacramento. I'm honored to be serving as mayor of Santa Barbara and proud to be a candidate for state assembly. My dedication to public service comes directly from my personal history. I come from a family of strong women, a union family, a family that votes in every election. I grew up in East Los Angeles, raised by my mother and grandmother, as my father was serving time in prison. These challenges made me work hard in school and spend my afternoons in the public library. At UCSB, I studied the fine arts and settled in Santa Barbara with my younger sister after graduation. I worked as a theater arts teacher in public schools. I've worked as a legal secretary. And because of my writing skills and interest in government, I was a journalist for 15 years. For 3 years, I lived and worked in Ventura County as a news reporter. I ran successfully for city council in 2011, motivated to be a pro-environment force on a city council that opposed bicycle lanes. The council was also reluctant to protect our marine environment by banning single-use plastic bags. I'm the first Latina ever elected to the Santa Barbara City Council, and I've worked hard on voter registration in the Latino community. Because of my father, one of my signature community projects is gang prevention and youth empowerment. My goals in the Assembly are to improve public education, protect our natural resources, and create housing and job security for all Californians. Improving our quality of life means addressing climate disruption, making health care and education more accessible, and creating an economy that is sustainable and provides opportunity for everyone. I offer my executive leadership experience as mayor of a full-service charter city in the great state of California, and my endorsements reflect the strength of my candidacy. I'm endorsed by the California Federation of Teachers, the California Nurses Association, and California Environmental Justice Alliance. I have the endorsement of Jack O'Connell, formerly the State Superintendent of Public Instruction. He also served as Assembly member and Senator from this region. I am endorsed by State Controller Betty Yee and the California Latino Legislative Caucus, which includes members of our Assembly and Senate. And I have the endorsement of Civil Rights Leader Dolores Huerta. Please visit my website for more information. I ask for your vote and look forward to serving you as your next Assembly member. Thank you.
Well done, Betsy. Cathy should pay you to give all her speeches. As I said, things came together late. Okay, Mr. Blum reminded me that I forgot to make the most important housekeeping announcement, which is that the bar is open throughout. Just knock yourselves out. Okay, now, according to Natasha, I'm to pick a question out of the bag. I'm now going to pick a question out of the bag. I have no idea what it is. It's about housing. What a shock. Okay. Actually, we got more questions about housing than anything else, and statewide surveys consistently show it's the #1 concern that people have housing homelessness, so I think it's a good place to start. We're going to start at that end since we started with Elsa. California's economy, which Jonathan, you just noted, is the 5th largest in the world, is nearing 10 years of continuous growth, the longest expansion in history, and it accounts for about 15% of U.S. job growth. But we also have the nation's highest poverty rate, and most experts point to housing as the key factor underlying that, given that housing in California is 2.5 times as expensive at the national level. The governor has outlined a goal of building 3.5 million new housing units by 2025, but the state is far behind that pace. So amid the ongoing battle in Sacramento over how strong and aggressive the state should be in requiring local governments to build more, regardless of zoning, local zoning, how would you preserve Santa Barbara's character and historic resources in the face of statewide mandates to build more housing, John?
I think Santa Barbara's character and culture is preserved through the people, not the kinds of buildings we have. At the end of the day, the people who live here are struggling. The people who grew up in Santa Barbara are moving away from this city because they can't afford to grow up here or to build their lives here. I've talked to so many voters who've said, my kids can't live in Santa Barbara. So that's how you erode Santa Barbara's culture, by not building enough housing to keep people here. At the end of the day, if we don't build housing, especially affordable housing. That's what I particularly support. All the housing that has been built in Santa Barbara has been luxury condos, too expensive for anybody to really afford, besides usually high-earning outsiders who come in. That's how we preserve Santa Barbara, is by making sure that people can stay here, not having to commute from Murillo to work at UC Santa Barbara, which is a huge number of people who do need to do that. So that's what I propose to use. Let's get some more affordable housing built. Let's build it next to public transportation. Let's make sure people can really stay here. When you're paying 50 to 60% of your income into rent, that's not a sustainable way to run a society. That's squeezing people every single month when they only have just a small amount left to spend after they've paid their rent, which is a requirement. You need shelter. Housing is a human right. I do think so. Thank you.
Thanks. Steve Bennett, you've talked a lot about SOAR and how there have been environmental requirements put on developers in Ventura County. How does that square with the new state attitude coming with more and more mandates, and where do you come down on the sort of preservation build scale?
Well, the first thing in Ventura County in particular, with Los Angeles urban sprawl coming in, the question had to be, are you going to pave over all of your agricultural and greenbelt areas and then start getting creative about your housing? Or are you going to do it and still preserve that agricultural and open space area? And I think the latter is the far better way to go. You do have to be creative in terms of trying to address the housing affordability challenges that we have here in California. But you can't do that with the old thinking that just building more market rate housing is, that we could ever build enough market rate housing for all the people that want to move to Santa Barbara County and actually make it affordable. You have to focus, and if you want to preserve the character of Santa Barbara, you have to preserve all of the various income classes that need housing in Santa Barbara. If you look at some of the biggest tourism areas, they've lost their culture because they've become dominated only by outside tourists that have moved into an area, and their workers no longer live in those cities. In Aspen, they had to find specific areas. So my focus in the state legislature would be to try to say we have to emphasize affordable housing, fund those good quality projects that exist right now here in Santa Barbara, that have been run by the Housing Authority, et cetera, that fit in and give housing for your workforce. Thank you.
Thanks. So Jason, Newsom's goal would pencils out to 500,000 units a year statewide. How does that square with the character of Santa Barbara and what we would need to build there to be part of that equation?
So I've had the good fortune to meet with the governor, and I've met with the speaker, and I've met with Senator Wiener when he was in town. So I've met with all the people who are in charge of policy, and I've explained to them a few of the things that are unique about Santa Barbara. And they listened and they care, and so they're changing their outlook, at least on areas like ours, where you have unique characteristics. We're in a very sensitive ecosystem trapped between the mountains and the ocean. We have a very high renter rate of 65% when the state average is closer to 30%. Some of the things I've done, because Steve's exactly right, you need to be creative, and I've actually been creative when I was on council. So I pushed for ownership opportunities because our AUD, our past general plan, all but eliminated all building for ownership opportunities, which is the foundation of the middle class. I pushed for inclusionary housing. I pushed for 15%. We got 10%, and I was proud of that. Goleta just passed some, and they made a gloating comment to Santa Barbara because theirs is 15 or 20%. I have made motions on the council for housing downtown twice, and my colleague's not here to defend herself, but she voted against it. I put forth motions on multiple occasions for a housing task force, and one was eventually built, and that was what allowed us to tweak the AUD. I was one of the liaisons to our tenant landlord committee, and we brought forth a slew of tenant protections. And this goes back to when I was at Legal Aid Foundation and California Rural Legal Assistance, where a big part of our mandate was housing protection. So I've got an actual resume of solid accomplishments for residents, and I'll keep standing up for you.
Thanks. Mr. Blum?
Okay, thank you. So yeah, this is obviously a big issue. It's a complex one. It kind of pits local control versus state control. To me, the answer almost always is working together to solve problems. If it's local versus the state, it's pretty much not going to get solved. There's a lot of things at play here, as you well know: the need for affordable housing, the need for our children to be able to grow up and live in this wonderful place that we live, workers being able to afford to live where they work. And then, as has already been said, some cities have more room to build than others. So I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all solution. I don't think that the state or the governor or the state legislature should be mandating what localities do. It should be a balanced approach, but I don't think that the state just saying, here's what you got to do, and here's when you got to do it, and here's how much you got to do, that's not going to work. It'll just get caught up in litigation, and it'll take years to solve. There's also the side issues. We need more water, we need more transportation, our freeways aren't going to be big enough. So it's complicated, and I know you're all smart enough to understand it, but I don't have enough time to explain it all.
Thanks. Charles, but what's the role of the state and state mandates in building that much housing in that amount of time?
Well, personally, I think the private sector could build far more housing than the government could in the amount of time you're suggesting. If you let them build it, other people will see that and they'll build more. You've got to lessen regulations on the private sector, lessen regulations on building companies, lessen regulations on construction companies, and general zoning and permitting issues. And the state does need to work with local level, but it doesn't need to work with government. It needs to work with private sector. I'm a private sector believer. I believe in private ownership and private property rights. If you want to build housing on your property, you should be able to. If you want to farm on your property, you should be able to. And I believe if affordable housing is necessary, they should incentivize that. They shouldn't force it. Nothing should be forced by the government. That's getting into governmental takeover and control, which I'm very frightened of.
Okay, thanks. Elsa, do you agree with Charles on that, or do you feel like the state should have a bigger role in providing housing, and particularly housing for specific economic income levels?
So I do believe that there is a role for government to play in this. You all may have heard that recently SB 50 was defeated, and that was because it had mandates that people didn't want. For Santa Barbara, they were mandating 3 to 4 story housing. For Santa Barbara, it was going to be 1 more story than what we currently allow. And there were other problems with that particular piece of legislation. But I believe that we, to the extent that we can, we should exert local control. And I believe that it has to be it's a national crisis, so there needs to be federal, state, and local partnerships along with nonprofits. I think that there's some nonprofit agencies that are producing some beautiful housing that is affordable. We need to stop giving up our limited parcels to workforce housing, or under the guise of workforce housing that really isn't workforce housing. Something that costs over $5,200 a month is not, in my mind, the kind of workforce housing that I had anticipated. We also have to balance environment. We're going to continue to see climate change. 101 is our only way in and out. So we need to take those things into account.
Thank you. Steve Bennett, I'm going to follow up on this and start with the point that Elsa just made about Senate Bill 50, which was actually defeated for 2 years in a row now, which would have required higher density housing, mandated higher density housing in near transportation. Hannah Beth Jackson, our state senator, voted against that. It didn't get the assembly, so and we'll make this a 30-second question, please. Monique Limon didn't get to vote on it, but she voted against it. She helped kill it. Do you agree with that vote? And would you have taken the same vote or a different vote on that?
I would not have voted for SB 50 in the form that it was in at that point in time. It's a one-size-fits-all. It may be a good solution for San Francisco. It's not a good solution it was not a good solution for Santa Barbara. It did not have a requirement that if you're going to impose density, that it had to be affordable housing for your critical population that was there. And those are two, I think, serious problems. And you said 30 seconds, so I think I'm out of time. That's pretty short.
It's Jason, we'll go this way. Yes or no on SB 50?
No, and I told Senator Wiener that when he was here, and it's hard to tell him that. The guy is 6'8". He's a tall, lean, mean guy, and he's an attorney, and so he understood the points I made. And you're right, it's failed now twice, and I think the pendulum is swinging back. And I think it's time to acknowledge also if the demand is so high, prices are going to go up, and that's going to encourage building. The state really needs to stay out of the way, keep regulations streamlined, and help mom and pops because they're suffering because they're competing against these builders when they're trying to just fix a roof or put in solar or get a toilet fixed.
Thanks.
We've driven up those costs for all the poor people on fixed incomes.
Thanks. Stephen Blum, Hannah Beth Jackson, right or wrong on setup?
Yeah, no, she made the right vote, and I think I kind of already outlined the reasons why I'm much more in favor of local control in these kind of matters than state control. A place, again, like Santa Barbara, you have limited space to grow, where other places are much bigger. So the one-size-fits-all that I mentioned, that Steve mentioned, just isn't going to work, and they need to go back to the drawing board and come up with something that's going to work for more people.
Charles, yes or no?
No, I would not have.
Straight up, it's just no. There are certain areas that can take that and certain areas that cannot. I believe Santa Barbara is one of the areas that cannot take that as happily as San Francisco or Los Angeles can. So I think we do need to work on figuring out a system for all of California.
Elsa, I'm gonna guess you would have been a no on SB 50.
I would have been a no.
Okay. Jonathan, you get a whack at this. You're the one guy who's really talked about building more workforce housing. You think that was a good solution or not?
I probably would have voted yes on SB 50, but it wasn't my favorite bill. What I would have liked to see instead was creating those incentives for nonprofit housing developers, requiring a higher percentage of affordable housing to be built in the housing that's built. Then at the end of the day, we're being squeezed. People are suffering because of the lack of housing affordability, and we need to build some more housing, but I think it needs to be by nonprofit housing developers. So I would have voted yes and then amended the bill in the future, because waiting any longer will just continue to exacerbate the problem. Thank you.
All right. Jason, we're going to start with you on this one, another housing question. Voters in November, again, are likely to be asked to decide an initiative that would allow considerable expansion of rent control in California. Do you support or oppose rent control?
I support rent control in certain instances, like after there's a disaster, people shouldn't be allowed to spike rents and take advantage of people. And it really depends on the percentage. I mean, the devil's in the details. There are things that are called rent control that are different than things that aren't rent control. I went to Berkeley for law school, and I lived in Oakland. Because when I looked for housing in Berkeley, there were students who graduated 10 years before living in a 3-bedroom apartment alone because they were paying $300. So why leave? And unfortunately, they were working now in San Francisco. They had great paying jobs. There were people living in San Francisco working in Berkeley, and they wouldn't move because they were stuck they were happy to be in a rent-controlled apartment. So the system's broken. Unless you can really fix things, people are not going to build housing in California if they can't make profit. So you have to be really careful when you influence the market. So really cut the red tape, encourage people. Property prices, if they go up, people will build. If there's greater rents, people will build. Otherwise, we have so many unused houses in Santa Barbara. We need to encourage people on the Riviera who are empty nesters to move downtown and take advantage of the great amenities, the arts, the restaurants, and open up that housing to families. And maybe I'm a little biased because I had a baby girl in December, and we're looking at bigger housing.
When you work that in, yeah, that's good.
It takes too long to work at it. And there's so many houses that have empty rooms. So what we need is to get people to use what we have more effectively, because I think Mr. Blum said, we got a water supply we got to worry about too. It's not just building the houses, but we got to take care of all of our natural resources.
Okay. Stephen, do you think rent control is a boon or not for the housing market?
As they always say in the legal profession, it depends.
Thank you very much for that.
And rent control, if it's not too high, is fine. My daughter, where she lives, the rent can only go up 2% a year. Okay, that seems reasonable, but places, as we know, the rent control thing that was gonna come in January 1st, people use that opportunity to raise up their rents 10, 20% and draw people out of their place to live. So it's only good if it's within reason. I don't like to see people get priced out of their apartments and add to the homeless problem or other things like that. And it's, to me, without rent controls, it's a little bit like Prop 13. And it looks like some of other people in the room don't take this wrong or old enough to remember that Prop 13 was put in because people were being driven out of their homes because they couldn't afford to pay their property tax. I don't want to see people get driven out of their apartments because they can't afford their rent because the prices just go from $1,500 to $2,500, in 6 months or whatever.
Okay. Charles, let me take a wild guess.
Let's see if you can get it.
Got a 50-50 chance.
Absolutely not. That's more government control and government mandates over private systems. Yes. It's the same thing with the property tax. You're going to tax these people out of existence, and they are not going to want to build more property. They are not going to want to take the risk of owning said property and paying the property tax that's still there if they can't get anything out of it. It's all market-based issues pretty much at this point. If you build more, there will be more available and the price will go down. If you don't build any, like we haven't done, the price will go up. General economics at that point, so.
Elsa, any circumstance where you think rent control is a good idea?
In limited basis, I tend to agree with most of my opponents. I'll give you an experience, and that is that my partner and I were renting for 10 years, and the rent was increased such that it was better for us to buy a home. Our mortgage ended up being less than the rent. But we were lucky. We both have good paying jobs with good benefits, and we had a down payment. We were saving for a down payment. Not everyone can do that. And so I'm concerned, I would be concerned for those who can't afford housing in our community. And it's not just the low-income people, it's middle-income people.
All right. Jonathan, the mic gets passed. I'm going to guess that some of your constituents out in IV would think rent control is a good idea, considering some of the rents that are charged for the hovels out there. What's your take?
Not just Isla Vista, I've talked to people on the west side of Santa Barbara, on the Avenue in Ventura, all over the district who really feel strongly about rent control. And it's because rent control is actually the fastest, quickest, cheapest way to control housing costs. It's going to take a while to build enough housing to bring down costs for everybody. So rent control protects the people who are in housing right now. Most people who are actually homeless used to be renters in the cities they were homeless in. And that's because they were priced out of living in their apartments because the rent kept going up. And so rent control is actually another means to help stymie homelessness because you're helping keep people in their apartments. My family might be homeless if we didn't have rent control in Los Angeles. The rent goes up 3% every year predictably. You can plan for that. Incomes are usually at least going to hopefully go up 3% a year. But for most people, if you don't have rent control, the rent's going to go up higher than your income and you're going to really start squeezing people. And so also I'd say that Prop 13 is a form of rent control for homeowners and property owners because it's controlling the price of the property tax. And for homeowners, I think it's great. It really has done what it was intended to do, helping keep people, especially seniors, in their homes when they can't afford the growth in the property values. But we provide that benefit to homeowners. Renters would love that benefit too. They're people too. They want stable housing as well. So let's give everybody that same kind of benefit. So I do support rent control. I think we should be leaving it up to the cities to enact the rent control. I think the state did a good umbrella policy with the 8% maximum, and the local governments can enact other measures if they wanted to. Thank you.
I'm just curious, what age do you consider to be a senior? Me and Bennett ain't like wants to know who the hell Hubert Humphrey is. I'm sorry. Steve, rent control?
You know, I mentioned earlier in that brief introduction that for me, the important thing is to try to do good government. One of the real places where this comes true, I think, is the issue of rent control. We have 35 rent-controlled mobile home parks in Ventura, and they are a godsend for the seniors that live in those mobile home parks. So the question is, you have to do it right. But if you don't have rent control for those key units, you will change, and you talked about preserving the culture of Santa Barbara, you will change the makeup of your community over time. If you want to have the full spectrum of workers, if you want to have people that can live in your community and also serve you your coffee at Starbucks, etc., you have to have rent control. But if you don't want to have rent-controlled properties that become run down and aren't maintained properly, if you still want to create incentives for people to build new properties, I spend a lot of time trying to tinker and make our rent control law work so that we can still incentivize new properties, we still incentivize maintenance of those properties, but we preserve for the people that are there. It's the existing population and the existing workforce that I want to focus on, not the outsider that wants to move to Santa Barbara or move to Ventura County. And I want to do everything I can to try to protect and make a housing stock available for the people that are currently here. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Okay, we could spend our whole evening on housing. We got so many good questions, but I want to ask one more, but let's make this a 15-second question, because it's a pretty simple yes or no question. And we've been asked to ask this one. Many local governments, including Santa Barbara, have enacted laws regulating short-term rentals, Airbnb and other tourist-serving vacation rentals. Housing advocates say...
You can't make that 15 seconds.
30 seconds.
You haven't heard my brilliant framing yet. Housing advocates say STRs deplete the housing stock. Proponents say regulations are an unfair infringement on property rights. Should state government enact legislation to limit or ban new STRs? Stephen, you're first.
Stephen, I think that's Stephen. But you can go if you want to.
Can I have your 15 seconds? No!
I would think that's a local decision. So if one city wants to do it, that's fine, but the others, some other doesn't want to, so it should be a local matter. I wouldn't be in favor of a state mandate.
Same here, not in favor of a state mandate. That's local and individual level policies.
You should have said yes, just see if everybody's still awake, that's all. Elsa, do you think regulating STRs more from the state level is a good way to incentivize housing?
Local control. Whenever we can, local control.
All right. And Jonathan?
I think there needs to be a base state regulation, but for the most part local control. But at the end of the day, STRs can wipe out entire neighborhoods and make them into not housing for people who live in your city instead for tourists. So there needs to be a baseline at the state level and leave it up to the local control to figure out more details.
All right, Supervisor, 16 seconds.
It just baffles me that people say we have an affordable housing crisis, and then we turn around and we take a significant percentage of our affordable housing stock and turn it into tourist housing. And that does not make common sense if you want to solve the affordable housing problem. It is a combination of local government and state government to address that, but you have to be honest about taking your residential housing stock and converting it to tourist housing stock. And I'd like to have more time to explain why.
But basically, you think the state should be doing more?
I think everybody should be doing more. I think in the long run, thank you for a little bit extra time, in the long run, in the long run, you're going to find communities across California. Wherever it's really hitting hard, you're starting to see that pushback. On the Board of Supervisors, I brought the issue, and other supervisors said, look, nobody's complaining in my district yet. right? But they will. If you're now forcing, that person that's serving you coffee at Starbucks is competing with somebody from Sydney, Australia, who wants to come here and rent that place for the weekend, and they have to compete, and they can't compete. And so you're literally taking housing stock off the market at the same time that you have an affordable housing crisis. Does that make sense? Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
They're all right, but I'm the one who's actually done something about it. I organized a group of council members and county supervisors from around the state, and we testified one day at the Coastal Commission. And we had to educate them on what was happening in coastal cities, and they were very impacted by our testimony. And right now, they've created a subcommittee who's looking at changing the law to allow more local control. So again, pick the advocate who's been out there pushing for this for you, not people who have read talking points and know what to say.
Thanks. Okay. All right, now I have just drawn another, everybody got to talking, right? Yeah. Okay. And this is a series of questions about politics. And Charles, I'm going to start with you on this one because you're the only Republican. And then I've got the same question for all the Democrats. Republicans now control only 28 of 120 seats in the legislature. Why should voters believe that you could be effective in working on your behalf when you would be in such a tiny minority? Let's go 60 seconds with this.
Because right now we have a monoparty system in California, and you're still not getting your job done. They're still not doing what they need to do to get this right. I'm hoping maybe I can infuse a different opinion or maybe some different ideas to get us back on track. Because there are some serious issues in California, and you would think having a supermajority as Democrats, they would be able to do something about it. No, of course not. They just go spend, 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 we'll fix it that way, perfect, instead of actually coming up with genuine solutions to fix these issues that don't cost money, that don't take exorbitant amounts of time. We need to focus on the individuals here, not the government control of individuals.
Fair enough. Okay, on the Democrats, I want to ask this question. Do you support the idea of California being the center of resistance to the Trump administration as the governor and the attorney general do? Or do you think there should be a more cooperative relationship? And if so, what are some areas for cooperation? 60.
I am for resistance. And I will also say that I am someone who wants to work with other people. I don't think politics today is very good for anybody. I don't like the mudslinging back and forth between any of the parties. I have experience in working with people of diverse backgrounds, of diverse mindsets, and stopping and listening to them. I'm a Democrat, but as I've been walking the district, Republicans and independents have offered some really good solutions. And just because they're from a different party, that doesn't mean that I'm going to ignore them. And in fact, I'm compelled to listen to them. If I'm representing, they will be my constituencies as well.
Thank you. Jonathan, resistance, no resistance? Is there places for more cooperation with Trump than have happened so far in Sacramento?
California is the richest state and the richest country in the world.
Country?
We're the richest state in the richest country. Yeah, let me get my time back for that one. I think California has a responsibility to lead the country in different policy areas like making education a right and bringing back tuition-free college, enacting a Green New Deal to move away from fossil fuels once and for all and build a new economy. I don't think our focus should be resistance, but we must resist where we can. When the Trump administration is trying to roll back emission standards on cars, yes, we should resist. When the Trump administration is trying to pull away families apart from each other at the border, yes, we should be resisting. But that shouldn't be our focus. Our focus should be to be the leading example, the shining beacon for the rest of the nation, and I'm sure the rest will follow eventually like they always do. Thank you.
Steve Bennett, do you think the governor's the right take on this and the right operational view of being the leader of the resistance?
I mentioned that we should all work for good government. And good government means you take the legislative body that you come in contact with, you take the executive branch that you come in contact with, and you try to make it work. So you do try to cooperate, but you don't cooperate to the point where somebody who is unwilling to cooperate, somebody who is offensively going after you, that's where you draw the line. And the Trump administration, I don't believe, is actually the Republican Party. It's not the Republican Party that I've known for my whole political career. The Trump administration has focused on hostility at virtually every turn. So yes, that is when you resist. It's like, it's not what you start with, but it is what you move to when you have to defend your citizens, to defend the policies that you have, and to defend common sense things like participating in the global climate change effort. California has to resist and try to keep the United States at least semi-balanced when we have an out-of-control Trump administration. Thank you.
Jason?
I've had, unfortunately, experience working closely with a tyrant. I was a prosecutor for the United Nations, and I prosecuted
I'm not sure you're talking about City Hall again.
Slobodan Milosevic and other tyrants who committed genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity. And when it comes to what Trump's doing, and by the way, since Mr. Kroll's answer, I think the Trump administration's probably spent about $10 billion. So talk about partisanship and who's really spending money. The real problem is campaign finance reform, and you've heard me say this over and over. It's not one party or another's responsibility. It's the fact that so many lobbyists and special interests are polluting the system, which is why I've been really careful about who I'm taking money from. I'm not taking money from the biggest public employee unions in the state, okay? Because you're gonna have to go up there and vote on their contract in a few months. So you have to be really careful, and we need reforms. It's really sad what we're seeing now in the county supervisor's race with PACs being formed to spend cannabis money and other special interest money. So I'll just leave it at that, but no, you have someone up here who's been a prosecutor who really has fought for stability and integrity in government.
Thanks. Stephen, you've talked a lot about collaboration and your skills at bringing people together. Is there room to do that with Trump?
Keeping with the Hubert Humphrey theme, I'm pleased as punch to that. While I don't particularly care for the current president, I don't think my mission, if elected, would be to fight the current administration. I believe in working together with everyone that you can. Some people maybe you can't. But the thing that really disheartens me, one of the reasons I'm in this race, is Republicans aren't my enemy, and I shouldn't be, as a Democrat, the Republicans' enemy. If we've met the enemy and it's us, we're all in trouble. We need to work together for the common good. That shouldn't be rocket science. So if elected, I would seek to represent everyone, no matter what political spectrum. I would seek to improve California. If that meant opposing the president on policy, fine, but I am adamantly opposed to name-calling and mudslinging. It's not productive.
All right. One more quick question on politics. I think also we're going to start with you. And again, I'm going to split this between the Democrats and the Republican. 15 seconds. Would you name one issue on which you disagree with Governor Newsom?
Yes, so he wants to, what I talked about earlier, SB 50. He wants to move forward with SB 50. He says, okay, not right now, but he wanted to move forward with that. I disagree with it in its present form.
Jonathan, where do you disagree with the governor? That's coming out of your time, man. Just for that crack about seniors, okay?
I said seniors are 17 in high school. I think one area where I disagree with Governor Newsom is, when he says he made college free for 2 years at community colleges, that didn't actually happen, and it was more of a showy thing to say he accomplished a campaign promise. His reform only impacted a third of community college students and none of the CSU and UC students. I want to make it tuition free for all 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve?
Governor Newsom said that he wanted to build 3.5 million houses, but he didn't identify how many of those should be affordable houses. He didn't focus on that at all. And I think that there is a real special interest group in Sacramento that pushes only market rate housing. When I tried to push for affordable housing at the Board of Supervisors level, it was the, how much time do we have? 15.
I think your time's up.
Oh, you can't do justice
All
to
coming out of your closing statement, sir, Bennett.
I'm going to pull out my red card here.
Real quick, Jason.
I disagree with him on the housing. He should have really pushed for ownership opportunities, because again, that's how you get people to have stability. After a 15-year mortgage or 30-year mortgage, they're actually stable in their home. With renting, you just never know. Something can happen with the chief rent payer in your household. You could be fighting with someone. There's no security there.
All right, Stephen?
I'm going to cheat and say two things real quick. One, I think that the level of reserves, he should be putting a little bit more in there in his proposal for this year, and also the SB 5, the independent contractor. Yeah, excuse me. It's helped some but hurt others, and that's not a good thing.
All right, Charles, let me ask, just flip it a little. Name one issue on which you disagree with the Trump administration.
General foreign policy. I do not think he's doing the best job he can in that segment. Personally.
Okay.
I think he could do a lot better, but I'm not saying he's doing a terrible job, but he's not doing as good a job as I personally would like.
All right, fair enough. Okay, where did we start? We started with Elsa? Okay, so we're back to Jonathan. Yeah, okay.
Now we started with Elsa last time, we came down here.
Yeah, you've had being unfair?
That's right. You're always, I thought you were going this way, this way.
As I say, this came together rather quickly.
Drinks are open.
If you don't like it, you go. Okay, the most fundamental job of the legislature is to enact a budget. There's a coalition of education, labor, and social justice organizations circulating a petition for November ballot initiative that would amend California's famed Proposition 13 constitutional amendment by creating a split roll system that would allow greater increases on commercial property and raise somewhere between $7 and $12 billion a year for the state government. Do you support or oppose that approach? Let's do 60 seconds.
Yes, I support the Schools and Communities First initiative. I've supported it since 2017. I was the first candidate in this race to do so. It's a big reason why our educational system has been on the decline since the 1970s, because Schools and Communities First, or Prop 13, constricted a lot of the funding that would go to our schools. So I do support Schools and Communities First. One thing I'd go further on it is it doesn't satisfy in closing the corporate loophole where an LLC can own a property and the ownership of the LLC changes hands, then the property doesn't get reassessed. So you can just trade LLCs all day long and not have your property reassessed. That's wrong. That's a corporate loophole. We need to close that too. Thank you.
Steve? Split roll?
Split roll, I support that initiative because we have a real crisis, and Jonathan sort of alluded to it, and that is that we have too many times where corporate interests have found ways to get around Prop 13. We need more funding for education as it goes forward. If I had to do over again, I'd write a different initiative than that, but if I have to just say yes or no on this issue, I would vote yes on this issue, but I would do it differently if I was able to influence it from the beginning. But corporations that keep flipping properties and don't pay the increased property tax, that's completely unfair to people who buy new homes and pay enormously high property taxes living right next to their neighbor that's not paying very high property taxes at all. So new homeowners pay really high property taxes. Oftentimes, new business owners are not paying those high property taxes. That's unfair, and I think we need to find ways to address that. Prop 13 is a imperfect way, a community choice is an imperfect way to address that. Thank you.
Jason, would you?
No, we should only tweak it to address the loopholes they mentioned. This harms mom and pop businesses, which are already taking a punch in the gut because of online retailing. It ties the hand of legislature. Why do you want to elect us to go to Sacramento if we can't spend the money the way we need to spend the money? It doesn't hold people accountable. We've raised so much revenue in the last 10 years as a government, locally in cities, counties, school boards. The state keeps raising your taxes. What do you have to show for it? Are your lives better? Are the people living on the street homeless? Are their lives better after all of these tax increases? You better darn well make sure if we raise taxes that there are outcomes that have to be reached where we spend that money. Some of the money is going to teachers, and I think we need to improve our education system. As a former high school teacher sitting between two other former high school teachers, I want to make sure darn well sure we support our teachers, but we got to fix the system before we throw money at it. The worst schools get ripped off. They get ripped off in terms of their budget. They don't get the teachers that they deserve. They get the teachers that the school district sends their way. So we need to make a lot of changes before we just go start taking money out of people's pockets.
Thank you. Stephen, should we take commercial property out of the existing Prop 13 with the new Prop 13?
What I've seen of it and what has been explained to me, and again, it depends on who you listen to sometimes, I would be in favor of it. Prop 13 has helped homeowners, but it's really helped the large businesses who never turn their property over and are able to use those rules so that they're still paying tax rates based in the 70s. Nobody likes taxes, but taxes are the price of civilization. And I don't like to use the word fair because if life was fair, I'd be better looking. But everyone should pay their equitable share. Corporations, homeowners, everybody. And I see this as an attempt to kind of level the playing field.
And there's two reporters from the channels at City College. That was your lead, by the way. If life was fair, I'd be better looking. Thank you. Charles, do you think commercial property should be taken out of Prop 13?
No, the only people that hurts is mom and pop shops, as he said. If you take that away, all the huge corporations, as Mr. Blum said, they don't care. They have enough money to just go or move out of state. They can do that, not the mom and pop shops. They just have to close up business or start renting. You rent out your own business. You should own the building your business is in. We need to focus more on supporting our businesses and lowering taxes, not raising more taxes. We should, no new taxes, that's what I'm going on, no new taxes,
All right.
period.
Elsa, a lot of organizations like yours are supporting this initiative for a split roll. Where do you come down?
I come down where I think that we need to be more surgical with it. I don't like the idea of Disneyland and Knott's Berry Farm continuing to pay the same taxes that they were in the 70s. But I do want to protect mom and pop stores. And in the same way that I like protecting the long-term residential owners.
All right, thanks. I think Steve Bennett has the next question.
Is that okay with you?
You want to go the other? I don't know. Okay, state and local governments in California face about $400 billion in unfunded liability for pensions. $254 billion for pensions and $147 for health coverage for retired government workers. And the problem is most acute for cities and school districts. And a study in 2018 by the League of California Cities found that spending on retirement costs would nearly double from an average of about 8.3% of local general fund budgets in 2007 to 15.8% by 2015, and that these costs are approaching unsustainable levels. What can the state government, what would you do in the state assembly to address that problem?
Well, I'll answer that question by saying, what did I do at the county board of supervisors level? As I mentioned, when I was elected to the board of supervisors, we had 0 reserves. And one of the big challenges that we had in 2002 was that's when all the public safety unions in the state were pushing for the famous 3 at 50. And that was where you got to retire at age 50 if you were a public safety person with a very significant pension. It was unsustainable. And even though I had been endorsed by both the deputy sheriffs and the Firefighters Association, Ventura County was the first local government in the Ventura County area to say no. It was being granted by the city of Ventura, by the city of Oxnard, by the city of Simi Valley, and I said it was unsustainable. And as a result of that, those cities are in real trouble. But the statistics that Jerry just read don't apply to Ventura County. We have the highest bond rating that a county can achieve. And we have it because we got our pension cost under control in Ventura County. So like I said, good government means not being in anybody's pocket, scratching your head and saying, what is the best thing for the citizens overall? Letting pension costs get out of control is not good for the citizens. It's not sustainable. And we did that in Ventura County, and I'd do the same thing. I'd make the same effort at the state if I'm fortunate enough to be elected. Thank you.
Jason, rising pension costs, big problem at City Hall.
So if we took the split rule and applied that revenue source, if we passed that and paid off the pensions, I'd be a lot more likely to support it. But instead, we're going to raise people's salaries before we pay off the existing debt. Doesn't make any sense. As the finance chair of the city of Santa Barbara, I got our reserves almost up to 25%. So when I hear 13%, I get a little nervous. And I know county operations are different than city because I was a lawyer for the county of Santa Barbara. But 25% reserves was what we've achieved, and the pensions are a problem. Santa Barbara, the city of Santa Barbara also has the top bond rating. We've been very careful to monitor our finances and do a great job. And I'm going to be a penny pincher when I go to Sacramento. I'm going to make sure your money is spent very wisely. My grandparents were Depression refugees. On my mom's side, on my dad's side, they were refugees out of Mexico. They made every penny count. I can still picture my grandmother reusing the aluminum foil till there were so many holes in it. I mean, it was just incredible growing up to see how my grandparents saved and scrapped and reused. And I'm going to do that for you when I'm in Sacramento.
All right. Stephen, the courts have traditionally held that people who have been promised pensions have a right to them, and a lot of local governments have reacted by having a two-tier system, lowering benefits for new workers. What else could be done from the state perspective?
Yeah, but it's an earned benefit. It's deferred compensation. In full disclosure, I collect a STIRS pension, so I kind of like the system. But anyway, just it is a huge problem because things have changed when these pensions were first put in. The first public safety, by the way, was put in New York City in the 60s for the police. My uncle was the policemen's union who got that through. But people didn't live as long, and so there needs to be reform to the system. The 2013, I think, when Governor Brown and the legislature put in some reforms, that should have just been a start. They didn't go far enough. I read this morning in the paper that PERS is paying out the first $400,000 a year pension. So that's not good. The local school district's contribution used to be 8% and 8.25%. It's 19.1% of income now. So it's a huge hit on school districts as well as cities. It's a problem that needs to be solved, and there needs to be reform. It was nice while it lasted, but it's not sustainable.
Charles, let me just rephrase it a little bit. If, in fact, this dystopian view of what could happen to local government under the burden of pensions happens, should the state stand ready to bail out cities or counties that go bankrupt from pensions?
Personally, this is me talking here, but no, I don't think they should. I think the city got themselves there, but I do think they should help them, like to help alleviate some of the stress put on the city. Sure, but I don't think they should just bail them out. That's what the government did to Lehman Brothers back in the day. You can't just throw money. You can't just. Once again, you're just throwing money at it. got to reform the system and reform it so that you're, as you said, not taking 19% and using a 19% or some other high number like that to give pensions. Yeah, the number is $418,000 annual pension. 418.
For whom?
That is for Curtis Ishii.
I didn't mean his name. What did he do? What did he do? Is he a school?
He was the CalPER head. He was the head of
That is one city.
Thanks. Also, and just to let people know, the current chief just bought $3.1 billion of Chinese equities. So there you go. Just thought I'd throw that one in there.
Elsa, Stephen Blum said that the legislature failed to build on the reforms that Governor Brown signed in 2013. What else could the legislature do?
So here's one thing that I don't like about pensions as they exist, is that we can have public safety officials who draw down multiple pensions. And I think that that's outrageous. They get a good pension in any case, but to be able to draw down 2 or 3 pensions really drains our resources that we could use for other means. You know, at the Rape Crisis Center, I balance my budget every year. I get a clean audit every year. It means that I'm using the funds the way that taxpayers and the legislature intends. I would be very careful with your money, with our money. In Ventura, my partner works for Ventura County. At one point, his boss didn't know where $50,000 was. If I didn't know where $50,000...
That guy's in PERS.
Yeah, but I watch every penny, every dollar. To me, it's unacceptable to not know where $50,000 is.
Jonathan, a lot of progressives believe that going after pensions for public employees is kind of blaming the victim in a sense. Do you think we need more pension reform? Do you think the system's working okay?
I'll give a full disclosure as well. I'm a government employee, but I don't have a pension. I have a IRA, a simple IRA plan, because we're a new agency, and so we haven't set up anything like that yet. What I want to say here is that pensions are a good thing. People who have pensions retire and they give back to their community, they have healthier lives, they're productive, and they're really just more productive members of the community in their retirement. And so I think we need to protect pensions. I think the state needs to be funding the pension liabilities. At SBCC, yes, our liabilities is growing faster than our revenue is, and it's becoming a problem, but it's not the employee's fault. A government agency usually is paying its employees less than a private agency for doing equivalent work, and the pension is kind of the end of the tunnel promise that, okay, you'll accept a lower pay today, but you'll get a greater benefit at the end. So we can either pay our employees more in the government, or we can keep the pension system as it is now. And I support the current pension system. It really provides a lot to people to give back to their communities once they retire. And it's just something the state needs to fund, because we need good government employees. You don't want incompetent government employees. That's a terrible thing, right? So we want to be able to attract the best talent to work for the government. And one way you do that is by offering a good pension benefit if you can offer a good salary. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Can we do one more question before the break?
Short one.
Huh?
Short one.
Okay, short one. I figure we should probably mention climate change, since it's the existential issue of the time. So expenses associated with sea level rise caused by climate change will be extreme. Two-part question. Will you as a legislator commit to procuring state funding to assist coastal cities? And second, do you think the state has an obligation to pay private landowners for loss of property due to sea level rise? So, two-part question. Jason, we'll start with you.
What was the first part?
Will you commit as a legislator to procure state funding to assist coastal cities with problems associated with sea level rise, climate change related?
So one, like I already mentioned, I've already done that. I went to the Coastal Commission and asked them specifically to give funds to the UC system, the Cal State system, to do research, because we're looking at all these solutions and they're not scientifically tested. Two, private lands, no, we shouldn't reimburse people for, that creates moral risk. People will take risks thinking the government's gonna bail them out. So those are both big no-nos when you're a government. And this is similar to our taxing question. You know, we need to change how we're looking at the problem. With the tax fairness, we're still taxing like we're a manufacturing economy. We gotta look at the services economy and tax there. We're not taxing Amazon properly. So instead of creating new revenue off the backs of a business that can't bear it as it is, you have to be thinking ahead. So with greenhouse gases and climate change, what can we do to prevent more climate change? You know, I mentioned homelessness was something that our politicians seem to have ignored for a couple decades. Same thing with climate change. Ventura and then Santa Barbara were the two counties that heated up the most. You know, we just ignored it until it's too late. I have an environmental law degree. I ran a statewide environmental justice program.
Thank you.
Studied it in Germany. I'm going to move ahead when I get there.
All right, Stephen Blum, as an assembly person, would you try to procure state funding to assist coastal cities in Assembly District 37 that have problems with sea level rise, and do you think the state has an obligation to pay private landowners for loss of property?
Okay, since I live in a coastal city, I would say yes.
You're gonna probably say yes on the next one.
No, I don't think that we should be paying for the private loss. But fixing the environmental issues and our climate change issues, to me, is the biggest problem we face, for the simple reason that if we don't fix this one, all the other problems will go away.
All right. Charles, what's the state government's role in addressing sea level rise associated with climate change?
No to both. I'll go ahead and say no to both. Personally, my take as the evil Republican, the sea level.
Why do you put that in quotes?
Because some people might. I'm the lone Republican. Climate change is not that big of a deal for me. I'm worried about the people living here, not the climate really, because mainly, well, just research-wise and multiple research and studies, there are some that show that it has warmed, there are some show that it hasn't. There's some show that it's actually cooling, there's some show that it's warming faster than the others. I refuse to take a side on this, but no, I do not believe it's an actual issue.
Okay, no red cards on that one. Elsa, state role in sea level rise.
I do think the state has a role to play. Port Hueneme is a place where we get a lot of, you know, it's an active port, and we need to protect that with a higher seawall, because then we all will bear that consequence. In relation to private, I believe that private insurance needs to step up. And I know that insurance has wanted to leave our area as a result of the debris flow. And the insurance commissioner was here to deal with that and to talk with residents about that. I think that that's a good route to take, to get the insurance commissioner to pressure insurance. I don't like insurance just taking all of our money and then when there's a disaster saying, oh, not enough money. No, so sorry, you took the risk.
All right, Jonathan, I know climate change is one of the reasons that you state that you're running. Should the state have an expanded role there?
100% it should. Climate change is an existential threat to the future of humanity. Jason is right. Santa Barbara and Ventura counties have the most warming in the entire United States, already past the threshold that was set to be, you can't go back from that. And so what I think we need to be doing, excuse me, so we do need to be investing in communities, and that's why I support the Green New Deal, because it's a big public works investment to combat climate change, but also make our communities better. One specific project idea that I have is the Amtrak line that we have that serves the Central Coast. Part of that is eroding into the ocean. We need that rail line. So what I would support as an assembly member is getting funding to move that rail line inland from where it is on the coast near Carpinteria, and then move it also inland up north to have it go through Lompoc and Santa Maria so that more people can actually commute on the train down to Santa Barbara. So you're hitting it at both ends. Thank you.
Steve, can a state legislator have an effect on this issue?
Well, I'm glad you asked it that way, because the hardest problems for us to address are problems that are beyond our control. We can influence, but they're beyond our control. Climate change, we're not going to solve that just in Santa Barbara, or by efforts in Santa Barbara, or even efforts in California, or even efforts by the United States. We have to globally come together and try to solve that problem. Consequently, I believe that the role of the California legislature and the state of California is, number one, do our share in terms of carbon reductions. Number two, do what we can to make sure we encourage everybody else to do their share. And there are positive things you can do and negative things you can do. I think pulling out of the global climate accords was not a way to encourage everybody to do their share. And the third thing, when it comes to what is the role in terms of the state has to weigh, just like all government entities, you have to, what are the public benefits of subsidizing or helping, as Elsa said, the poor? Huge public benefit, yes, we should all come together. The less public benefits, the less we're likely to do that. Thank you.
Jason has just been the first person to wave a red card in 1 minute.
I believe that we can, as a community, change the world. I think Santa Barbara is uniquely
So
placed.
this is a challenge to
Yes.
Bennett. Okay.
I think we're uniquely placed because of Earth Day and the pipeline spills and our dramatic ecosystem. We can lead the community, we can lead the state, we can lead the country, we can lead the world, and we should be. We have that moral obligation. And what the heck are we giving up on if we're not out there leading? A couple extra days drinking wine and tasting craft beer. Let's get out there and change the world. In fact, I wrote a resolution, and my colleagues on the council, I'm pleased, signed it, and we passed it. 85 other cities, Jerry, have copied my resolution and passed it. We absolutely have to be leaders. We have to throw ourselves into the machine and change things. This is an existential threat. This is an all-hands-on-deck moment. I was an early adopter of an electric vehicle. I went to environmental law school in '92. This was way before people were talking about climate change. You know, you need to elect a leader who's not just saying things, but actually changing the world. On my third electric vehicle, I started with the Leaf, and we have an electric bike. You got to get out there and do things.
Thanks. Okay, you were the one that wanted the red card, so don't blame me for being over on time. 1 minute reply from
I
Steve.
think the implication of that was that I'm suggesting we shouldn't go out and lead the world.
I thought the implication was you were a blues hound, but
And I very clearly stated, first, we should do our share, and second, we should do what it takes to encourage everybody else to do their share. That is leadership. That is getting out there and making sure that we take all of the positions that encourage everybody else to do their share. Classic leadership. California led with improving fuel mileage in cars. We can do that with all kinds of things with the size of our economy. So certainly that falls into the second category that I identified, which is do everything we can to get everybody else to do their share. We will not solve this if we either try to assert ourselves in a way that others don't follow us, or if we do things that discourage people from doing the hard things to do their share. We've got to demonstrate we're willing to do hard things, and we have to encourage everybody else to do that. And that's a unique kind of leadership, and it's the kind of leadership I believe I've been able to do in Ventura County on a number of issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, Natasha, 6 minutes and 20 seconds over, and it would have only been 4:20 without the red card, so I just, my job here is done. Okay, we're going to take a break, and Natasha's going to tell us what's next on the program.
You guys are so awesome. And wasn't Jerry fantastic? We are so lucky to have such amazing candidates. So, good news, full service bar, paid. But we're going to take 15 minutes. Let's do 12, because we've got a surprise for you.